Welcome into the hot shop, everyone. Today, our hot shop team has been working on some goblets. And to start us off, I'm going to have everyone take a little look at the anatomy of a goblet up on the screen. So up on the screen, you can see the anatomy of a goblet. So first, we're going to have to work on the bowl portion or the cup of the goblet. And then we will put that away, set it aside, keep it nice and warm while we work on the stem and the foot. And then after we finish that stem, we can then attach the bowl to the top of the stem and we will have our final product. And to give everyone a little rundown of the hot shop, just in case someone hasn't been here before, everything we do in here starts in our furnaces, which are the large tanks with the closed doors, over on the left and on the right of the hot shop. And these hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky, kind of like honey. So we stick our pipe into the glass, and when we turn, we gather a ball on the end of our pipe, and from here we can blow into the end of our hollow pipe, and this will expand the glass like a balloon, which is how we're getting our hollow form at the center bench here. And the open face furnace that they're using over and over again at the center bench here is our glory hole, which is our reheating chamber, and this is running at around 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little bit hotter than that molten glass. And if anyone ever has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll come right over. So right now, Gabe is going in with a pair of jacks, which are those two metal blades. And you could see that he was carving a divot into the glass near the pipe. And this area is called a jack line. So he just carved a jack line into the glass. And these are always important because this is where we remove the piece later on from this pipe. So to create a flat bottom for this cup, you could see they are using a wooden paddle with the jack staying on the sides, and this is kind of forcing the glass into a bit of a sharper corner while also flattening the bottom. When glass is molten, it is acting like a liquid, so it really doesn't want to be in those sharp corners, so we have to force it into that sharp corner. So now a small bit of clear glass is brought over and placed onto the bottom of the cup. And this is going to be creating something that we call the avolio. So this is going to be the connection point between the cup and the stem itself. And can I actually have the little slideshow of previous Red Hot auction goblets, please? So the Museum of Glass has an auction every year called Red Hot, and they usually make goblets for each of these auctions to auction off. And up on screen, you can see some of the previous year's goblets. So now that they have finished that cup portion with the connection area called the avolio, they have brought over a second pipe, and we always call this second pipe a punty. So they attach the punty to the bottom. It is a solid rod, and this allows us to break the piece off of its original pipe. So now after breaking this piece off, we're left with a small opening, and from here we're going to be able to open this up and complete this cup shape. So now that this cup portion of the goblet has been completed, Gabe is going in with a pair of shears and he's cutting at that connection a little bit. And this is causing a little bit of shock, so this is cracking the area because of the cold metal tool. So when he taps the pipe, that vibration is going to travel to those cracks that were created and knock off onto a heated fork. And now that this cup is done, they're going ahead and putting it in this silver box here called the garage. And the garage is going to keep it nice and warm at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So now we're going to be able to make the stem and the foot of the goblet. And then when we have finished that, we'll pull it out and attach it to the top. We've always got to keep that glass nice and warm if we're going to heat it up again. Otherwise, it could go through thermal shock. So the way that we're applying color for this specific part of the stem was through frit, F-R-I-T. So there are these little silver bowls on this table over here, on this big metal table, and inside of these bowls are little shards of colored glass. So Gabe took his molten glass and rolled it in the shards, and this stuck to the outside of that glass. And then as soon as he melted it down, this created a layer of color on the outside of this glass. So with this, he has just heated it up again, and he has stuffed it into a mold on the floor called an optic mold. And inside of this mold, we actually have ridges going all the way from the top to the bottom. You can kind of see a little closer up on screen as well. And so this is going to give us a physical and a visual texture on the outside of this glass. So this section of the stem that they're making right now is called the optic ball because we stuffed it into an optic mold. So a small bit of clear glass is brought over, and this is just going to create a small disc on this optic ball where we're going to attach another part of the stem next. So now a larger bit of clear glass has been brought over, and this is going to be dropped on top of that optic ball. And this is going to turn into that thin, long section of the stem. Can I actually have the anatomy of a goblet again, please? Just a little refresher. So up on screen, we have completed the bowl or the cup portion. We have set it aside. And now we have created the optic ball and added a disc. And now the stem is being created itself. So this tool right here is a pair of diamond shears. It's called diamond shears specifically because they're 4 blades that meet together to make a diamond shape whenever we use it to cut. So now another small bit of clear glass is brought over and added to the end of the stem. And this is going to turn into another small disc where we're actually going to place our foot of the goblet. So for this foot, they're actually going to create something called a blown foot. So Ben is preparing a small clear bubble over at that metal table. And this is going to be dropped on top of the stem. So the bubble is brought over and dropped onto the bottom of the stem. And the blown foot is important because this is going to ensure that all of the walls are nice and thin and even throughout. So this is going to make sure that the glass is lighter overall versus using something like solid glass. So you could see to break this bubble open, Gabe went in with a pair of jacks, but when he went in and made that line, he made sure not to cinch it all the way shut, so there's still an opening going through those 2 bubbles. And then all they had to do was knock that one bubble on the end off, and this left an opening behind. So from here, he's gonna be able to go in and flare this out into the foot for the goblet. So Gabe goes in with the pair of jacks, and you could see he starts at a very low angle with the jacks almost all the way closed, and he changes that angle and opens them slowly as that glass starts to widen. And a paddle and the jacks are used at the same time to make sure that this disc is actually completely flat and straight. So when it's done, this piece is going to sit nice and flat on the table. So now that we have finished the stem and the foot of this goblet, a second pipe is going to be attached to the bottom of this foot, right in the center. So this is called a punty. The punty is allowing them to transfer the stem off of its original pipe. So now they're going to have access to the other side or the top of this stem. So now this part of the process is very quick. A very small amount of clear glass is applied to the very top of the optic ball or the stem, and then the cup or bowl portion of the goblet is placed on top of that. And so that little bit of clear glass is going to help act as a glue and hold those two pieces together perfectly. And now we have everything assembled, and our final steps are just making sure that everything is nice and straight and even before we put it away. So now that they've finished this piece, Gabe applies a little bit of water to that punty or that pipe. And then when he taps, that breaks the piece cleanly off the pipe. And let's give them a round of applause for completing that piece. Thank you. So this is going into the annealer, which is that big black box over there, where it's going to very slowly cool down, at least overnight, so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. And now while we wait for them to get started on the next one, I am going to show you guys a small video on how we refill our furnaces. Since we're using a lot of clear glass lately, I'm sure we'll have to do that sometime. Can I have the charging the furnace video, please?
Charging the furnace is what we call filling the furnace up with glass. Glass cullet is washed clean and loaded into tubes for filling. Here at the museum, we don't use recycled bottles. Instead, we melt cullet that has been specifically designed to make blown glass art. The primary ingredient in glass is silica sand, or silicon dioxide. The other two main ingredients are soda, or sodium oxide, which lowers the melting temperature, and lime, or calcium oxide, the stabilizer. Once the cullet is loaded into the 2300-degree furnace, a rake is used to level the glass for even melting. The furnaces at the Museum of Glass hold approximately 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass and run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So if you don't remember earlier, the way that we're getting color for this little optic ball portion of the stem, you could see Gabe just heated up his glass and rolled it into a little metal bowl on the table. And inside of this bowl, we have little shards of colored glass called frit. So welcome to those who just joined. Today our hot shop team is working on making some goblets, and these are prototypes for an upcoming auction called Red Hot. So at the center bench, they are working on the stem of the goblet. They just attached a punty, which is that secondary pipe, to the bottom of the foot, and this has given them access to the top of the stem. So now from here, they're going to be able to attach that cup. So just now, a very small bit of clear glass was attached to the top of that optic ball. And then the top portion, the cup or the bowl, was attached to that clear bit as well. And that clear bit was acting like a glue. So now these two pieces are very firmly together. And now that they have it all assembled, they're just going to go in and make sure everything is straight and even before getting ready to put it away. So now Gabe applies a little bit of water to the punty, or that rod that's attached to the bottom. And then when he taps the pipe, this will break the piece cleanly off the pipe. And sometimes that connection is a little too strong, so the piece doesn't want to come off quite yet. So this is going to be picked up with a heated fork and then be carried over to the annealer. The annealer, which is that big black box on the wall. And this is where it's going to very slowly cool down, at least overnight, so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. And while we wait for them to get started on their next piece, I'm going to talk a little bit about color, or rather I'm going to show you a little video about color. So today we are only applying color through frit, F-R-I-T. So these are little shards of colored glass that we have in the bowls on the table here. And this will create a little bit of a speckled layer on the outside of our piece with color. But there's another way that we actually apply color pretty frequently called a color drop or a color overlay. So could I have that color overlay video, please? Could I have the color overlay video, please?
The color in glass comes from adding various materials to the mixture of raw ingredients called batch. Most of the colorants are compounds containing some kind of metal. For example, adding cobalt to clear glass creates a deep blue. Tin and antimony can be used to create white glass, and gold chloride can produce a rich red or pink colored glass. Colored glass is melted in furnaces, just like clear glass, and then is usually rolled into bars for storage and easy application. In order to apply color bar to a bubble, we first need to preheat the color to approximately 950 or 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in a color oven or garage. Once warm, the color is then picked up on the end of a punty rod using a little bit of clear glass as a support. The color is then heated in the 2300 degree glory hole to soften it and make it malleable, while another artist creates a small bubble of clear glass on a blowpipe. Once warm, the color is dropped over the clear bubble, and then using a variety of hand tools or the steel marver, the color is rolled back over the clear in an even layer. This process is called dropping color, or creating a color overlay. Depending on the project, that bubble is then usually gathered over with clear glass and blown into the final form. The finished product may appear to be all made from colored glass, but when viewed in cross-section, we can see that there is only a thin layer of color sandwiched between many layers of clear glass.
So previously you watched them put a goblet together and create the stem for the goblet, and now they're actually working on the cup or the bowl portion of the goblet. So whenever you see the artist hang the pipe at an angle like this, this is to change the shape of the glass. So in this case, Gabe was hanging it down, and this is lengthening the bubble or creating a longer shape. But on the opposite, you could also hang it up and create a more squat or short shape. So this is going to create a pretty tall cup or bowl portion for this goblet. So now a paddle is being pressed onto the bottom of this cup while the jacks or the two blades are being held on the side. And this is creating a bottom for this cup and also forcing the glass into that nice sharp corner. Could I actually have the anatomy of a goblet up on the screen, please? So up on the screen you can see the anatomy of a goblet. So we have created the cup or the bowl portion. Next we're going to have to create the avolia, which is going to be the connection between the bowl and the stem. Now that we have the cup portion of our goblet pretty much finished, we're going to have to attach a second pipe to the bottom so that we can transfer it to another pipe and start working on the other side of this cup. So Sarah has just brought over that punty, which is that second pipe, and this has been attached to the bottom of this cup or the bottom of the avolia. And then Gabe is going to break this off the original pipe. And after breaking it off, we're left with a very small opening. And from here, they're going to be able to go back in and open this up into that final cup shape. Just a reminder, if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I'll answer any questions you have. So whenever we finish making that cup, we bring it over and we set it inside of this big silver box called the garage. And the garage is going to keep it nice and warm at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So later on, when we make the stem of our goblet, we'll pull out that cup and attach it to the top like you guys saw earlier. So just a few seconds ago, Gabe stuffed this bubble into a mold on the floor. And inside of this mold, we have ridges going all the way from the top to the bottom. So when we stuff the glass inside of the mold, that texture is applied to the glass as well. So we have a physical and a visual texture of ridges on the outside of this glass now, much like the image on the screen as well. And so this is being used to create what we call an optic ball because it was stuffed inside of an optic mold. And this is going to be the first part of our stem. So now a larger bit of clear glass has been attached to this optic ball. And you can see it was a little bit extended, so this is going to be turned into that next part of the stem, the thin, long portion. So this tool that Gabe is using here is a pair of diamond shears, and he's using this to hold on to the end of this glass as a handle, and then he's going to use them to trim the stem shorter as well. We call them diamond shears because when we close the sides of these shears, they create a diamond shape with the 4 blades. So now a small bit of clear glass is going to be attached to the bottom of that stem, and this is just going to be turned into a small disc, and this is where they're going to attach the foot of the goblet. And to anyone who recently joined, our Hot Shop team is working on some goblets today. And can I actually have the anatomy of a goblet up on the screen, just in case anyone hasn't seen it yet? So up on screen, you can see the anatomy of a goblet. We have made our bowl portion and we have set it aside. And now we're working on the stem and the foot of this goblet. And once we have finished this, we'll be able to pull the bowl back out and attach it to the top of that stem. So over at that metal table, Ben is preparing a small clear bubble that's going to be attached as the foot of this goblet. So this is being dropped onto the bottom of the stem, and this is called a blown foot. So this is going to make sure that the glass is nice and thin and even all throughout that foot. So the goblet overall is also going to be nice and light. So the way that Gabe just created an opening in this bubble, he used the pair of jacks, which are the 2 metal blades, and he carved a divot into the glass, but he made sure not to cinch all the way down. So there's an opening that goes through both bubbles, and then when he knocks that bubble off the end, he's left over with a small opening. So from here, he's going to be able to go in and flare this out into the final foot shape. So now that we have finished the stem and the foot of our goblet, we're going to have to attach a second pipe to the bottom where the foot is so that we can switch the orientation of the stem so we can have access to the other side of the stem. So Sarah is coming over with that second pipe. We call the second pipe a punty. So the punty is being attached to the center of the bottom of this foot. And this is going to let Gabe break the piece off of its original pipe. So now we have access to the top of the stem where we're going to put our cup or bowl portion of this goblet. So now this next part is pretty quick. Sarah is bringing over a small bit of clear glass, and this is going to be attached to the very top of this optic ball on the top of the stem. And then the cup is going to be attached to the top of that optic ball, using that little bit of clear as a glue. So now that these two pieces have been assembled, we have our complete goblet. And our final steps are going to be making sure everything is straight and even before putting it away. So now that this goblet has been completed, Gabe applies a little bit of water to that connection area, which causes small cracks. And then he taps the pipe, and this vibration travels to those cracks and breaks it cleanly off the pipe. And this is being carried over to the annealer, which is the big black box on the wall, where it's going to slowly cool down, at least overnight, so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. So welcome to anyone who may have recently joined. Today we have been working on creating some goblet prototypes for an upcoming auction called Red Hot that we have every year. And can I actually have the little slideshow of previous Red Hot goblets? So for anyone who recently joined, today we are working on goblet prototypes for an upcoming auction called Red Hot. And so you could see the leftover scraps on the floor. We've been working with a lot of blue, and all of the goblets we have created today have a very tall cup attached to that blue optic ball and then connected to a clear stem. And to explain this better, can I actually have the anatomy of a goblet diagram, please? So up on screen you can see the anatomy of a goblet. We have our bowl on top, which is what we're creating right now. And onto this bowl we will attach an avolio, which is that connection point between the bowl and the stem itself. And then once we finish this cup portion, we're actually going to set it aside and keep it nice and warm while we create the stem. And then after the stem is done, we come back with that cup and attach it to the top, assembling it all together. So now that that cup has been finished, it is brought over to this big silver box here called the garage. And the garage is going to keep it warm at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So later on, we'll be able to pull it back out and attach it to the top of that stem. And I just had a question about a furnace. So I'm going to give a little rundown of the hot shop for anyone who hasn't been here before. So everything we do in here starts in our furnace, which you could see Gabe just gathered some fresh clear glass out of. And these hold 1,000 pounds of molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And when this glass is molten, it's very viscous and sticky, kind of like honey. So we stick our pipe into the glass, and when we turn, it gathers a ball on the end. And from there, we can blow into it. It'll blow out much like a balloon, or we can use our solid glass for sculpting. And the open face furnace that you see them using over and over at the center is our reheating chamber called a glory hole. And these are usually running at around 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And both these types of furnaces run off of natural gas and forced air. And to get our color for this specific part of the piece today, you could see Gabe, after getting that glass nice and hot, went over to the table here. And inside these metal bowls, we have little shards of colored glass called frit. So he rolled the molten glass in this frit, and this stuck to the outside. And after he melts it down, we are left with a layer of color on the outside of our glass. So after getting that glass hot once more, Gabe walked over to a mold on the floor and stuffed the bubble in the mold. And this gave the glass a physical and a visual texture of ridges going all the way from the top to the bottom. And this is going to help us create what's called an optic ball. So this is going to be a part of the stem for our goblet. We call it an optic ball because we created the pattern using an optic mold. So onto this optic ball, they just applied a small bit of clear glass, and this is just going to be turned into a small disc. This is where we're attaching the next part of our stem. So now Ben has come over with a larger bit of clear glass, and this is being dropped onto the bottom of the stem. And this is going to be lengthened into that next part of the stem. So now another small bit of clear is attached to the bottom of this stem, and this part is going to be flattened into a disc. This is where we're actually going to be attaching the foot of our goblet. So now Ben has brought over a small clear bubble, and this is being dropped onto the bottom of the stem, and this is called a blown foot. So Gabe is actually going to open this bubble up and be able to flare it out into that foot. And the blown foot is actually very important because it allows that glass to be nice and thin and even, giving the goblet a lighter weight overall and making sure everything is nice and balanced. So Gabe is going in with a pair of jacks, and he's making a divot in the glass, but he's actually not cinching all the way down. Otherwise, he would close off that connection of air between those two bubbles. So now when we break that second bubble off, as I just did, we're left over with a small opening. And from here, Gabe is going to be able to go in and flare this out. So now that we have our completed stem and foot for our goblet, we're going to have to attach a second pipe to the bottom of the foot so we can break it off of its original pipe and have access to the top of that stem. So Sarah had brought over that punty, which is that second pipe, and it was attached to the center of the bottom of our foot. And then Gabe is going to break this off the pipe. And now to put simply, our last steps are going to be attaching the cup to the top of the stem and then putting it away. So now this part of the process is pretty quick. A very small amount of clear is attached to the top of the optic ball. And then they go ahead and attach that cup or bowl to the very top as well. And that little bit of clear is going to act as a glue and hold those two pieces strongly together. And so now we have our goblet assembled, and our last steps are going to be making sure everything is straight and even before we go ahead and put it away. So now Gabe applies a little bit of water to that connection point on the puntee, and this is creating cracking. So when he taps the pipe, this creates a vibration that travels to those cracks and breaks the piece off the pipe. And let's give them a round of applause for completing that goblet. Thank you for your round of applause. So this is being put into the annealer, which is that big black box on the wall. And this is where it's going to slowly cool down at least overnight so it doesn't break due to thermal shock. If we were to leave that fresh hot piece out at room temperature, it would start cracking and breaking apart in a matter of seconds to minutes, which is why we saw them heating it up so frequently as well. Welcome into the hot shop. Today, our hot shop team has been working on goblet prototypes, but as you can see, this piece that they are working on right now is not a goblet. This is a commission piece, and they have pulled it back out. They had made it previously, and now they're going to be editing it. And we're going to be learning together because I have not seen them make this. I don't know how they're going to edit it. But if you have any questions about glass or the process itself, I am your person. Just raise your hand and let me know, and I'll come right over. So this torch that Ben is using at the center bench is one of the hottest items in the hot shop, actually, at around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And our molten glass is at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit, so this is over double that heat. And it's used for very, very quick spot heating. So you can see how quickly this glass got heated back up. And this tool that he was using there is made out of graphite, actually, and he's using it to widen that hole or make sure it was nice and even. So for those who recently joined, our artist down on the bench, Ben, is just lightly touching up this piece. This is a commission piece, and there was a request to just edit a small portion of it. So it looked like this when he pulled it out, and he's just widened a hole very slightly. And now he is breaking the piece off of the pipe with a little bit of water. The water's going to cause little cracks at that connection point. And then all he has to do is tap the pipe. And this breaks the piece cleanly off the pipe. And this can be carried over to the annealer, which is the big black box on the wall, where it's going to very slowly cool down at least overnight. So while they're getting started on their next project, I'm going to briefly play a video that's going to explain how we get color in the first place on our pieces, and a recently used or commonly used technique is called a color drop or a color overlay. So can I have the color overlay video, please?
The color in glass comes from adding various materials to the mixture of raw ingredients called batch. Most of the colorants are compounds containing some kind of metal. For example, adding cobalt to clear glass creates a deep blue. Tin and antimony can be used to create white glass, and gold chloride can produce a rich red or pink colored glass. Colored glass is melted in furnaces, just like clear glass, and then is usually rolled into bars for storage and easy application. In order to apply color bar to a bubble, we first need to preheat the color to approximately 950 or 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in a color oven or garage. Once warm, the color is then picked up on the end of a punty rod using a little bit of clear glass as a support. The color is then heated in the 2300 degree glory hole to soften it and make it malleable, while another artist creates a small bubble of clear glass on a blowpipe. Once warm, the color is dropped over the clear bubble, and then using a variety of hand tools or the steel marver, the color is rolled back over the clear in an even layer. This process is called dropping color, or creating a color overlay. Depending on the project, that bubble is then usually gathered over with clear glass and blown into the final form. The finished product may appear to be all made from colored glass, but when viewed in cross-section, we can see that there is only a thin layer of color sandwiched between many layers of clear glass.
So next, our hot shop team is going to be heating up a sheet of color. And out of this color, they're going to roll some glass over top of it and be able to create individual small cups out of this colored glass. So this is going to basically be prep work for future goblets that they're going to be making for our upcoming Red Hot auction that we have once a year. And can I actually have the little slideshow of those previous Red Hot goblets? So up on screen, you'll see a little slideshow of these goblets that have been made previously for these Red Hot auctions. So to start everything off, they have a small plate at the center bench on the end of a large metal prong. And this is actually going to be heated up lightly, just enough for that glass to be a little bit bendable so they can roll it up on the outside of a pipe. So welcome to anyone who may have recently joined us. Our hot shop team right now is going to be working on creating a long tube out of a special color that they have. And out of this tube, they're going to create small cups that are going to be starters, quote unquote. And this is going to be for individual goblets or individual goblet prototypes for an upcoming auction called Red Hot. So now you can see Sarah is bringing over a hot plate on the end of a large metal metal plate. And this is going to be heated up gently. On this plate, we have our special color that we're going to be rolling up on the outside of this bubble. And this has to be gently heated, so we're making sure it's not too hot that it's going to stick to the plate, but we're making sure it's hot enough to stick to that bubble and bend. So now Ben has come over with that bubble, and he has placed it onto that sheet of glass. And this is going to have to be heated up a little bit more to help it bend around that bubble. So now that this color has been applied to the outside of our bubble, Ben is going over to the marver, which is this big metal table, and he's going to even that color out over top of that bubble. So this upcoming theme for our Red Hot auction is going to be iridescent and sparkly, sort of like disco ball and pastel colors. So you could tell with this color right here, we have an iridescent sheen on the outside of this glass. So right now, Ben is actually using a stack of newspapers soaked in water to shape this bubble. The newspapers are one of the only flexible tools we have in our hot shop. And this torch that they're using here is running at around the same temperature as our reheating chamber at around 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, except our furnaces run off of natural gas and forced air, while our torches run off of oxygen and propane. And so they're using this to heat an area that's closer to the pipe, because this area is actually a little bit colder. It's the last thing going into the furnace and the first thing coming out. So they want to make sure that this piece has even heat all the way through, because they're going to stretch it out into a long, even tube, which is why you can see him hanging it down at an angle. So he's stretching the glass. So this tube is going to be sectioned off into little cups, and each of these individual cups is going to be able to be turned into an individual piece. So after breaking that small piece off the end earlier, this was leaving Ben a small opening in the end of this tube. So he was able to go in and widen that opening just a little bit. And now he's making that first individual cup that I was talking about. So with this cup, in the future, they would be able to attach this to the end of a hollow pipe and create an individual bubble and turn this into a piece later on. But for now, they are going to break this little cup off onto a heated fork. And this is going to go into this big silver box here called the garage. And this is going to keep it nice and warm at around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And each time we break off a cup, we're left over with a small opening over and over again to start the next cup right away.